Since getting my Nintendo Switch in 2019, there was a lot of instances where I wondered if the system was really worth the money, if it was something that I should have bothered to pick up, because quite honestly, for those first couple of years that I owned it, I didn't really play it all that often. I messed around with emulators on it because I did buy a moddable version 1 console back in 2019, and I did mod it and try out some various homebrew things and whatnot, but it wasn't a system that I was playing a ton because a lot of the games were released on it just simply had better versions on my Xbox I would rather play instead, and I found myself not using the handheld features of it all that often, but that all changed last year when I became a dad. And anybody that's a parent knows that you oftentimes have a lot less time to play video games when you have young kids, and when you do have time to play, it's often for short periods of time, probably in random parts of your home. And for that, the Nintendo Switch is perfect. It's perfect not just because it's this portable console that now I play almost exclusively in handheld mode, to the point where I almost think I could have just owned a Switch Lite, but it's not just that. It's the games on this handheld. People do not give the Switch enough credit. They say that's a kid's system, and obviously there are plenty of great games for kids on here, which I think makes it be a very versatile console. But what I really enjoyed have been the ports, the many games that have came to the Switch that were maybe on more superior hardware at the time. Take Dying Light, for instance, and they came to the Switch, they got downgraded, and they run, in a lot of cases, reasonably well. I mean, obviously it's not an Xbox One or Xbox Series X quality experience, it's the Nintendo Switch, but it looks and plays pretty good. The same with The Witcher 3, and there are an absolute plethora of games that released on the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3 that were made portable for the first time when they were put on the Nintendo Switch. Those are games from a generation that I think of very fondly. It was kind of the generation where microtransactions were creeping in, but it hadn't totally overtaken the console yet. And even just microtransactions on the Switch in general are not overly egregious. There's not a ton of games on this system that I think, oh, well, that's a game that I wouldn't even want to take a look at because it's so bogged down by microtransactions. There are a lot of very complete games on the Nintendo Switch, and I've seen a lot of talk about the downfall of gaming. You know, everything is going south as far as gaming. Microtransactions have ruined everything. Games are consistently incomplete, and you can say there have been a ton of games that have launched very rockily on the Switch, and that's understandable given the hardware constraints. But I must say that, you know, all the doomsday things that I've seen here on YouTube about the quality of gaming going forward, the Switch has been very refreshing to just be able to play this casually, have fun with it. I'm not playing competitive games online besides, you know, maybe occasionally Splatoon 3, and it doesn't feel overwhelming. It just simply feels fun. It fits into the amount of time that I have to play on this little handheld. So you can say what you want about Nintendo and maybe their practices of hardly ever discounting their first party games, but those are solid games. I mean, those are experiences that you can take a look at something like Nintendo Switch Sports, and yeah, it's pretty half-baked out of the box, but for the most part, these Nintendo games are solid experiences that don't have any DLC oftentimes, and the DLC that is available is quality DLC like you have in the Breath of the Wild, where it's worthwhile to pick it up and there's not these egregious microtransactions nickel and diming you in this overwhelming sense of needing to constantly be actively on in these live service games. It's not those kind of games. And even the non-first party games, the third party games, like these many ports that I've shown in this video, they aren't in that sort of overwhelming, egregious fashion that I feel like now as a parent I just don't simply have time to keep up with. I play when I can, and that's far less often than I used to be able to, but the Nintendo Switch is a system that can accommodate that. And maybe most of all, this is a system that I can't wait to share with my daughter, because I know that there are many games on this platform that obviously are great for kids, maybe even before they get into kindergarten. I mean, there are some games on here, the Paw Patrol games, maybe for instance, that are worth taking a look at for kids even under the age of 5, being able to pick up and play. The Yoshi games, the Kirby games, I mean, they're fairly accessible games on this console, even for younger kids, and I think that being able to share that with my daughter is something that's going to be very special about the Nintendo Switch, and there's not a ton of experiences to be had like that on the Xbox Series S that I have. So above all, despite all the doomsday talk of, you know, gaming being at its end because everything's been driven down by, you know, corporate profit lines, I feel very at ease with the Nintendo Switch and feel like I'm fortunate enough to be a gamer, to be a parent in an era where there are accessible experiences still for people that, only have a marginable amount of time. I mean, you think back 20 years ago, what would I have had as an option to play? It would have been a Game Boy Advance, and not to knock on the Game Boy Advance, but it's not nearly as close to a console experience as what you're able to get on a Nintendo Switch. So despite all the stereotypes, when Nintendo comes out with statistics that say things like the average Nintendo Switch gamer is 20 to 30 years old, I'm not entirely surprised. I'm in that age demographic, and I can see why, maybe there's other young parents in that age demographic as well. And this is the perfect console for them, for the college students, for people who are busy but still want to play video games and enjoy them in a way that doesn't have egregious microtransactions packed into a lot of games. They aren't concerned about the graphics. They want to re-experience some of these older titles that maybe they enjoyed back on the 360 or the PlayStation 3. This is the perfect place to be able to do that. Thank you guys for watching. I'm Bailey, and I will see you in the next video.